September the 16th, year 1581. As the sun dipped below the forested hills of Bavaria, the last golden rays spilled over the rooftops of Neumarkt, bathing the town square in a dying light that seemed both reverent and ominous. The cobblestones, warm from the day's heat, began to cool beneath a creeping dusk, and the town held its breath as if the heavens themselves awaited judgment. The air held a strange charge, part excitement, part dread, like the tense moment before a thunderclap. In the center of the square, an ominous structure rose from the stones, a giant execution wheel, mounted like a throne of agony, casting a long skeletal shadow across the crowd. It was not often that such a gathering occurred, and never before for a man like Peter Niers. Fathers lifted children onto their shoulders, not shielding them but letting them look, as if to say, "See what happens to monsters." Vendors hawked roasted chestnuts, hot wine, and warm ale, as if this were a festival and not a descent into orchestrated horror. Women clutched rosaries or held hands tightly, while others whispered gossip or legends they'd heard second or third hand. For what the citizens of Bavaria had come to see that day was no ordinary hanging or dignified beheading. No, they had come for something spectacularly obscene, the public dismemberment of a man believed by many to be Europe's most monstrous criminal, perhaps not even fully human. Peter Niers was led out from the town jail under heavy guard. Shackled and half-naked, his gaunt figure trembled, but whether from cold or anticipation, none could say. His face bore the deep etchings of a life spent skulking beyond the boundaries of humanity. His cheeks were sunken, his skin pale and sickly, and his eyes, those wild, flickering eyes, seemed to reflect fires not yet lit. He looked less like a condemned man than some revenant dragged from a crypt. Some whispered that he wasn't bound with iron, but with wards and prayers, lest he call down infernal powers to vanish once again. His name had passed like a curse across village firesides and travelers' camps for over 40 years. And even now, as he was marched toward death, more than one soul in the crowd flinched and muttered protective charms, fearing he might yet vanish into mist or summon hell itself in a final, terrible act of defiance. After all, how else could one explain how he had evaded capture for so long? Peter Niers had haunted the forests and roads of southern Germany for over 4 decades. Born around 1540 in the fractured and war-ravaged region of Franconia, his early life was marked by the bleak hallmarks of chaos, plague, famine, mercenary bands, and orphanhood. Abandoned to the wilds of human indifference, he learned quickly that mercy had no place in survival. He began by stealing bread and ended by butchering travelers. His passage from beggar to butcher was not swift, but it was steady. His soul, if one believed he had such a thing, grew darker with every crime. It was said that Peter Niers killed over 500 people. That number, repeated like a black hymn, may have been an exaggeration or not. The true toll was impossible to know. His crimes surpassed ordinary villainy and entered the realm of ritual. He didn't just rob and kill, he tortured, dismembered, preserved. Victims were kept alive for days as he tested methods of pain. He broke bones one by one, peeled flesh from limbs, and then he devoured them. Most horrifying of all were the claims that he consumed the flesh of unborn children, believing that such acts granted him supernatural protections. He was said to have cut fetuses from pregnant women, still twitching, and used them in spells. Among his possessions were jars of preserved organs, a sack filled with fingers and ears, and grim fetishes soaked in blood and wax. Eyewitnesses who survived his attacks described him speaking arcane phrases while chewing raw hearts. Animals avoided him. Mothers swore their babies screamed when he passed unseen nearby. In a time of witches, werewolves, and revenants, Peter Niers became a living myth, a bogeyman cloaked in flesh. Parents warned their children, "Behave, or Peter Niers will get you." But this was no fairy tale. This was flesh and blood. Despite repeated hunts by soldiers and bounty seekers, he slipped through their fingers again and again. He knew the deep forests of Swabia and Bavaria, better than any poacher. He traveled by night, moved with disguises, and spoke a dozen dialects. Most chillingly, he built a network of spies and sympathizers, beggars, prostitutes, vagrants, and fellow criminals who feared him more than they feared the gallows. Some claimed he led a cult. Others believed he was the devil's own emissary. His legends stretched from Ulm to Nuremberg, and every corpse added to his terrifying prestige. His capture came not by luck, but by vengeance. Georg Amann, magistrate of Neumarkt, had spent years hunting Niers after his own cousin was found disemboweled, her womb empty. Amann dedicated himself with a fanatic's focus, compiling sightings, intercepting rumors, bribing criminals, even disguising himself on the road. It became a war of attrition. And finally, in August of 1581, he caught the devil asleep literally. Peter was found alone in a forest cabin near Wernberg, his wards removed, perhaps believing himself safe. He was taken without a struggle. When his captors realized who he was, they sent riders to Neumarkt by the hour, and the town began to prepare not for justice but for a reckoning. His imprisonment lasted several weeks. During that time, witnesses swore he never begged. He chuckled to himself. He muttered in languages no one recognized. Guards claimed he talked to shadows and asked unseen visitors if they were pleased with him. During interrogations, he spoke clearly, almost proudly. Torture was unnecessary. He listed his crimes as if reading a market ledger. He described how to boil bones for marrow, which organs were the most potent, which infants gave the strongest magic. His words were so grotesque that court scribes refused to record them in full, writing instead only unspeakable. He was found guilty of everything. The sentence, death by the breaking wheel. But not a swift death. Not for Peter Niers. Survived that? Reward your subscribe. No pincers promise. Before the wheel he would be punished piece by piece. His flesh would be pinched and torn with glowing iron pincers. His joints would be shattered one after another, slowly, meticulously. The executioner would take great care not to kill him too quickly. And finally, once broken and bleeding, he would be placed upon the wheel itself and left to burn alive over coals. His body twisted and splintered, his screams rising above the crowd like some infernal hymn. Even hardened soldiers looked away. Even executioners muttered prayers. Even the crowd, so eager at first, now shifted with unease. But this was the price, they believed, for 40 years of terror. And as the drums began to roll and the torches were lit, the crowd held its breath. For they were about to see not just the execution of a man, but the attempted exorcism of a legend. On the morning of September the 16th, the square became a stage for retribution. The town bell rang out in long, slow tolls. The smell of incense drifted from the nearby chapel, mingling with the scent of oil and sweat in the packed square. Peter Niers was brought forth like a sacrificial beast, a macabre parody of a religious procession. He was gaunt, his skin pale against the rough ropes that bound him. Some in the crowd spat, others crossed themselves. His reputation had made him a near, mythical embodiment of evil. The crowd that gathered was vast, some claiming it was the largest assembly Neumarkt had ever seen. People stood on rooftops, climbed trees, and crowded onto wagons just to glimpse the spectacle. Others camped the night before to secure a vantage point. Inns were filled beyond capacity, and merchants seized the opportunity to sell trinkets depicting the execution wheel, talismans against evil, and even pastries shaped like twisted limbs. Children clung to their mothers. Priests stood nearby, praying aloud and sprinkling holy water on those who approached too closely. Peddlers moved among the people selling charms and amulets. Town criers called out the list of charges, their voices growing hoarse by midday. Stripped to the waist, Niers was tied to the wheel with coarse rope that cut into his skin. The executioner, clad in a thick leather apron and wielding iron tools, took his place beside him. The first punishment began, The pincers, heated until they glowed, were pressed against his chest, thighs, and back. Each contact produced a shriek that rose like steam into the cold morning air, mingled with the scent of burning flesh. People in the front rows covered their faces. Some wept. Others merely stared, transfixed by the horror. Niers cursed his executioners, his voice hoarse but defiant, filled with venom. Then came the breaking. The executioner raised a heavy iron bar and brought it down upon Niers' fingers. The sound of splintering bone echoed like hammer strikes on dry wood. One by one, the digits were shattered, then the wrists, forearms, shoulders. Each blow was delivered with practiced precision. The executioner moved with grim ritual, his face stoic as though enacting a dark sacrament. Then it was the ribs, each one broken in sequence, drawing gasps from the crowd. The legs followed. Thigh, shin, ankle, each segment crushed, bent grotesquely. The hips were last, and with their cracking, Niers' body slumped, but remained alive, a grotesque ruin of blood and brokenness. After nearly 2 hours of this methodical destruction, Niers was still breathing. Barely. His eyes were swollen shut, his jaw slack, but there was movement, twitches of agony, a shallow rising of his chest. A hushed awe fell over the crowd. Some murmured that perhaps the devil still clung to him, refusing to let his servant die. The final act began. A pyre of dry wood, soaked in oil, had been stacked beneath the wheel. As torches were brought forward, the square lit with flickering orange. Smoke curled upward, and flames licked at the broken man. His skin blistered, then blackened. The smell was unbearable. Still, he did not beg. Still, he did not plead. Whether from defiance or unconsciousness, no cry escaped his lips as the fire consumed him. His ashes were collected and scattered to the wind, a deliberate act to deny him even the dishonor of a grave. The magistrates decreed that no shrine would ever be raised, no memory preserved save for the horror of his deeds. His name would become a warning, his fate a cautionary tale. Peter Niers' death marked the end of a reign of terror. But it also raised deeper questions. How does a man become such a monster? Is evil born or made? Was Niers a symptom of his brutal time, or something worse? Historians point to the harshness of the 16th century. Famines, religious wars, lawlessness. In such a world, a man like Niers could thrive. He embodied the fears of his age, the occult, the outsider, the predator in the woods. For decades after his death, mothers continued to invoke his name. Artists painted him as a devil. Pamphlets sold in marketplaces retold his crimes with lurid woodcuts. He became Germany's boogeyman, the demon who had once walked among them. Today, the square in Neumarkt is a place of peace. Tourists stroll past cafes, unaware of what once occurred there. But if you ask the locals, especially the old ones, they might lower their voices and say, yes, this is where Peter Niers was broken. They might not speak his name aloud. Truth beats horror. Subscribe now, your next monster's already waiting.